Okay, everybody, for this week, the topic is how to add meaning and clarity with punctuation. So why is punctuation important in making things clear? Well, the goal here is to learn to recap and revise the importance of accurate basic punctuation, like putting what we call time setting in Norwegian, putting things in the right place. Why is that important? Let's have a look at what's in the yellow square here. Long ago, early forms of writing had no punctuation at all. Not everyone could write, and those who could, did not even use spaces between their words. It must have made reading very difficult indeed. So try reading the following passage from Lewis Carroll's Alice in Wonderland. Is it as straightforward to read and understand as the kind of punctuated writing you're used to? Now in this white square, you're going to find an extract of a passage from Alice in Wonderland. It looks weird and it's difficult to read. Try reading it. I'm not going to do it for you. Okay, now that you've tried to read through this part, we're going to go to the PowerPoint. You also have a task page that we're going to visit. For checking your progress, I think we need to spend some more time on this. Like you see, there are some goals here, like I can demarcate sentences and I can use full stops, question marks, and exclamation marks to mark the end of my sentences. I sometimes remember apostrophes, so that's sort of the first level. I can demarcate sentences and use both forms of apostrophe in the right place, as well as use a comma correctly most times. Second level. Third level is I can demarcate sentences and use both forms of the apostrophe, the comma, and speech punctuation accurately nearly all the time. So you see the difficulty level here. All right, for the purposes of this video, I'm going to use the PowerPoint printout. The PowerPoint itself is linked here as usual, but I'm using the printout for ease of going back and forth between that and the task page. Now, let's see. All right, so add meaning and clarity with punctuation. Note here, you're going to need a large sheet of paper and a colored pen for this session. So if you don't have that right where you are, take a minute, pause the video, and go get what you need. Moving on. This is a task you can work with a partner or work with your group on Teams. If you're at home, you work with a group on Teams. So you're going to make a copy of the passage. And when it says the passage, we are talking about the weird text here, right? This is the passage. You are going to copy that over on a piece of paper, meaning you're going to write it. Yeah? Write it by hand on a piece of paper. It's going to need to be large enough that you can work with it afterwards. All right, so note, the paper is going to be read by others. Write clearly. If you have issues writing by hand, a solution might be, if you have a printer available, to make a printout, to copy it and make a printout. Just make sure there's space between the words and it's large enough, okay? So now when you make the copy, you're going to insert the spaces between the words. That means you're going to take that passage that has no spaces, no nothing, and separate the individual words so that it looks a little bit more like a text. Now, after you've done that, after you have your paper, you have the text copied on it, you have the text separated into individual words, you're going to think about the 4 sentence functions that you learned about. This is what we had before Easter break. Now, we learned about statements, questions, commands, and exclamations. Now, which sentence function out of these ends with a question mark? Which sentence function ends with an exclamation mark? All right. If you figure that out, move on to the next slide. The remaining two sentence functions, the one that does not end with a question mark or does not end with an exclamation mark, the ones you have left, they end with full stops. Full stops, that's this. That's what we in Norwegian call, yes, punctum. So work out where Lewis Carroll is using statements, questions, or exclamations in the passage that you just wrote down. You add them into your copy using a colored pen. Now you've written the text, right? You're probably using a normal pen, and you need a colored pen to put in the punctuation, like the exclamation marks, the questions, and the full stops. Another thing to call a full stop is a period. I might use that sometimes as well. All right, so you add them in using a colored pen. The reason for using a colored pen is so it shows up clearly. And it says, already you should start to see the passage beginning to make more sense. Right? You now have something that looks like actual sentences. But other types of punctuation also help make writing clearer, like apostrophes. Apostrophes help us to clear meaning in two ways. That's the next thing we're going to look at now. Apostrophes of omission. Omission means leaving something out, okay? So the first way apostrophes work is by pinpointing where you've joined two words together to make a more informal version. If someone sends you an email asking for the arrangement for a party, you're unlikely to reply with, I do not know, it has not been decided yet, right? It's a little stilted, it's a little formal, it doesn't fit. So it would be much more likely that you'd write, I don't know, we haven't sorted it out yet. Now you see, that's the same two sentences, but the apostrophes will help you to create that clear, friendly, informal tone. They're known as apostrophes of omissions. Oh, I see a little typo here, sorry about that. As the apostrophe replaces the letters you have missed out. See, instead of I do not know, we have I don't know. And what's missing here is, that's right, the O in not. Same thing here, the O in not, it has not been decided yet. We say we haven't sorted it out yet. So instead of have not, the O is missing, and we mark that with an apostrophe. So the general rule is that you need to identify which letters are removed and join the words back together with the apostrophe. Do not becomes don't, and it becomes don't, all right? So now it's the task again. Again, using a colored pen, so it shows up clearly, find any apostrophes of omission that need to be added to your passage from Alice in Wonderland. Right? Any place where you can draw words together where things need to be added. Moving on. Apostrophes of possession. Okay, so possession is when something belongs to someone. You have something in your possession. It belongs to you. You own it, and you're holding it, right? So the second way apostrophes add clarity to your writing is by showing belonging. And these are used a little differently. Like these are known as apostrophes of possession. And they change their place depending on whether you're showing belonging to one person or thing or many. So for example, you have the boys' books. Now you see here, this is one boy. He has a lot of books. So it's the boys' books. Like notice that this places the apostrophe straight after the word boy and before the S. The boys' books. So this tells you there's only one boy and all the books belong to him. Now there's a different way of doing this. And it says, however, you can write the boys' books. And when you place the apostrophe after the S of boys, it tells us there's a group of boys with books belonging to all of them. And since there's already an S here, boys, you don't write boyses, right? The boys, you don't add an S after that. You have the S, the apostrophe comes after. So this tells us there's a group, there's several boys, and the books belong to all of them. Now look at these sentences, like the sentences below. These are the sentences below, which all use apostrophes incorrectly. Identify the problem and write out the sentence correctly. Now to do this, you need to use your task page. The sentences are: who's seen Lydia's shoes? The students' revision notes were in their books. The builder was late putting in all my windows and doors. The two girls' bicycles were left in the driveway. There isn't any point in reading the newspapers today. So all of these sentences, they have a problem with punctuation. They have a problem with apostrophes being used wrongly. So you're going to identify what's the problem with this, and then you go and do it in your task page. On your task page, it's going to look like this. So you write sentence A in here, and you write sentence B in here, C, D, and E, and you write them in what you think is the correct form. Okay, moving on from that, talk about commas. Now, commas are fun. Commas have a variety of uses, but they're often overused, underused, or misplaced, like put in the wrong place. Commas form a mini break or boundary in a sentence where you want to separate different aspects of an idea or description. A comma creates these like natural pauses, kind of where you feel like you want to take a breath when you're reading through a sentence. A lot of times we can find out where they go just because it feels natural, but there are rules. So let's have a look. The table gives some of the most common uses of the comma that you will need in your writing. Look at the examples provided, and then it's supposed to say here, write an example of your own for each usage. Now, it's probably been a little bit of fast work here, so I'm sorry about the typos. But anyways, so use of commas. Commas are used to separate out the items in a list. There are some examples here. In the cake shop, I couldn't decide between the chocolate eclairs, the strawberry tarts, the vanilla slices. They all look delicious. So now you write an example of your own where you use commas to separate out the items in a list. Commas are also used to link adjectives when more than one is used to describe something. The black, stormy night filled me with dread. The thrashing, pounding waves made a dramatic sight on the beach. So you link adjectives when you describe. Now you write a sentence that describes something. You go to your task page and you will find where to do this. Okay, so what this is going to look like on a task page is here in the tables. This commas, write your example sentences here. So I've shortened from the table quite a bit, but it's follows the same order. So commas used to separate items in a list. You write your example sentence right here. Commas used to, not link, but link adjectives. You write your example sentence right there, and so on and so forth. All right, going back to the examples, you use commas sometimes at the beginning of a sentence where they create a pause, and they create a pause after names, discourse markers, such as like however, additionally, secondly, firstly, the transitions like that, or answers like yes or no. So, Alex, can you stop playing on the computer now? However, the story ends happily. Yes, it's going to be a good day. So it creates that tone, that little stop, the little breather that makes it sound natural. They can also be used in pairs, like to drop extra pieces of information into a sentence. I've forgotten to mark this here, but it says the day, which began gloomily, there's another comma, ended on a high note. The river, which was polluted, burst its banks and flooded the nearby village. Now I see that I've forgotten to mark this one with red, but you see there are two commas. There's a comma on each of these. So what you see is this would be a complete sentence without this added part. You could say the day ended on a high note. Or the river burst its banks and flooded a nearby village. It's still a complete sentence, but you add more information, says which began gloomily, or which was polluted. So when you add in something like that, which we call it diaksetning in Norwegian, like this part that is, this cannot stand on its own, which began gloomily is not a full sentence, but it adds extra information so that you need a comma there and a comma there because it is inserted. All right, so now you need an example for this, an example for this on your own as well. You fill that in your task page. Pause the video and do that. Then you have speech punctuations, because I mean, when you write something, it needs to be clear when someone's actually speaking. Same thing when you write. It's really confusing to read a text where people are speaking and it's not marked that someone's speaking. So when characters are in conversation with each other in a novel or short story, this is called dialogue, which is similar to the Norwegian word, right? Dialogue. We present the words they speak in speech marks. However, other punctuation marks are also used alongside the speech marks. Now, this is something that I find a lot of students have problems with identifying how to do correctly. Like, where do we add punctuation when it's dialogue? So I'm going to go with that. Are you absolutely serious? Paul said. Okay, so you have what do you notice about what the dialogue begins with? Now, if you're really clever, you will know that I have used different colors, both in the markings here and the little questions. So what the dialogue begins with, it's going to be red. What do you notice about it? And then you have some sentence punctuation. Where does the sentence punctuation go? Now, this is in blue. So look at the blue punctuation. Where does it go? Like, does it go before or after the speech marks? And moving on here, it says, of course, Sheila replied. I'm deadly serious. All right, look at the green one. What happens when a new speaker begins to speak? Like in both instances here, you have speech marks. You have to start with a speech mark. This lets the reader know, right, that someone started to speak. But then, like, what do you have to put in when the speaker hasn't finished speaking? Like sometimes you put in, like, of course, Sheila replied, right? That makes it, when you write sentences, you could put Sheila replied at the end here, but it gets a little stilted and sounds, if that's how you're doing it every single time, it gets a bit, what we in Norwegian would call ensformig, like it gets the same every time. It looks the same every time, and it's kind of boring to read. So we sometimes put it in the middle, but then you need to put some punctuation here. So what's needed when it hasn't finished speaking? Well, you use a comma. But then, look at the red one. What is needed before the speaker begins again? Well, now you need to signify again, you need to signal that there's someone speaking. So you need another speech mark. And obviously you also have to finish the speech marks here on both places, right? In both places. So here is your task. Now, look back at Alice in Wonderland. Add in any commas you feel would help to clarify the meaning. All right, back to your piece of paper with the Alice in Wonderland text. Now add commas. After you've added commas, you add any speech punctuation, like speech marks, to show where Alice is using dialogue. Where is she talking? Add in the speech marks. Now, if you worked in pairs or groups, you join up with another pair and you compare your texts. Are they identical? Now, the thing is, like, if you're at home, this might be difficult. So if you're at home, you're going to save your texts, bring them to school. This is really important. Bring them to school so you can compare them. Now look at them. Are they identical? Like, have you chosen to put punctuation in the same places? And if not, where are they different? Now, this is why you need the colored pen, because it needs to show up what you've done. So discuss your choices. Why did you do what you did. You make any necessary corrections, like correct any errors that you find. And then you hand in your finished text, your piece of paper, to me. That is your task for the first day, right? The day you are at home. For the people who are at school, this is what we're going to be doing the first day. Now, I'm going to go to your task page where you have other tasks to do on, well, Thursday for you guys, on the next day. So for some of you, this will be your at-home lesson, and for some of you, this will be your school lesson. Now, back to your task page. These two in green, these were done yesterday. Now, looking at the task for today. There are 18 punctuation marks missing from the following passage of the novel A Kestrel for a Knave by Barry Hines. The sentence punctuation is in place, but the following has been left out. Apostrophes, commas, and speech marks. Like there are no apostrophes, there are no commas, there are no speech marks. They're all missing from this text. Identify where all the missing punctuation marks go using the rules you've just learned to help you. Maybe I should read this for you. I'm sick of you boys, you'll be the death of me. Not a day goes by without me having to deal with a line of boys. I can't remember a day, not one day, in all the years I've been in school. And how long's that? 10 years. And the school's no better now than it was on the day that it opened. I can't understand it. I can't understand it at all. The boys couldn't understand it either, and they dropped their eyes as he searched for an answer in their faces. Failing to find one there, he stared past them out of the window. The lawn stretching down to the front railings was studded with worm casts and badly in need of its spring growth. The border separating the lawn from the drive was turned earth, and in the center of the lawn stood a silver birch tree in a little round bed. Now for the speaking activity for the second day, I want you at home to try this as well. And you need to try it with a partner. You could use, if you're 3, for instance, or you can use this with your group, but then you're going to need to find other videos as well. I picked out these 2. So if you're 2 people, then the first, how this is done is that the first person is going to watch this video, linked in here, the Tom and Jerry video. So person 1 watches it, and while that person's watching it, the other person needs to turn away from the screen. Like no watching the screen, because the person watching the video is going to, in English, narrate or tell the other person what's going on. So you're going to be describing everything to the other person. Now, if we're looking at the instructions, I'm just going to leave them here so it's easier. So det står at eleven jobber parvis. Den ene eleven ser frem mot tavle lerret, mens den andre vender ryggen til. Start filmen uten lyd. Og den eleven som ser skjermen må fortelle den andre hva som skjer. Oppmuntre elevene til bare å bruke engelsk og til å finne omvei rundt ord de ikke kommer på. Omtrent halvveis kan man stoppe filmen og la elevene bytte roller. So what we're going to do is for the person who starts watching this, watch it without sound. Like no sound. Turn that off. And then you're going to describe to the other person what's going on. Like blah, 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 as well as you can. And then halfway through the movie, stop it. And change roles. I've added 2 movies so that like everyone can have a go a couple of times. If you're more than 1 person, either sort it out so the group does it at different times, or you can split the movie in 3, for instance, or whatever. But 2 people are really the ideal pairing for this. All right. Yeah, so that's basically your task for today. You have the, sorry about that. You have the task page here, right? And you have the speaking activity. That's for today. I'm probably also going to put in a link for something, but these are your main tasks in English for the second day. Right, any questions? Sorry, put them on Teams in the chat. and I'll try to get back to you.